The 2025 F1 season is officially underway, and we officially have points on the board. Plenty to talk about. What does this tell us? What did we learn? What did we take away? And what are we still completely clueless on? Stay tuned to find out what our thoughts are on the F1 2025 Australian Grand Prix. This is Turn 1 Podcast. We're your hosts, Jeremiah
and Thomas.
And I think the most efficient way to start this off is to talk about our winners and losers of this Grand Prix. Without a doubt, we got to know who was the big hitters of the show, who kind of let us down a little bit. I want to start with you, and then obviously I'll go after you.
My big winner of the day, surprisingly, out of nowhere, is Nico Hulkenberg and the Kick-Stake Sauber team.
Nico Hulkenberg,
after one race weekend, has more points than their entire team had last season.
Love it.
What a day.
Give me two winners, and then I'll give you mine.
You want another winner from me? Okay.
Yeah, let's hear it. Who's your backup?
I might steal somebody from you. Okay. Give me the Mercedes team. They came out, placed third and fourth in the race. They beat the Ferraris straight up. They beat one of the McLarens, although technicality with Oscar Piastri going out of the race. But if you're going to start the season and you're on the bubble of being the third or fourth team, that's a pretty good start for Mercedes claiming the third and fourth spot in that race if they can keep that up.
Absolutely. I think that Mercedes showed a lot of potential, but I want to save that talk for a little bit later because I do have some thoughts on that. I'll talk about my winners. I have two winners. One of them obvious, maybe one not so much. We'll go with the obvious one. Kimi Antonelli. Kimi Antonelli finishing in his first Grand Prix in fourth place in the Mercedes car, a top team against the big dogs, and started way back. What was it? He didn't make it to Q2, if I'm not mistaken, so he started 16th?
He was 16th, and that's what I was going to add. It's not like he qualied high in a Mercedes car and benefited from the car. The dude had to work for that fourth place finish.
Absolutely amazing. Stayed out of trouble. There was plenty of onboard cameras where things started to get a little bit squirrely, and he would pull out of it, get it straightened out, stay on track, which in this Grand Prix says everything. And again, I want to save that for later because I have thoughts on that. So I'll give you my second winner. Without a doubt, hands down, Alex Albon. Dude, Williams in this season in general, just coming out of nowhere. And for him to be able to finish fifth and take huge points for Williams early, that is just amazing. I can't wait to see what the future holds for Williams at the beginning of the season, at least. Maybe if they don't bring the upgrades, it tapers off at the end. But right now, they are steaming and they are rolling through things, and it is so exciting.
I won't touch on the other half of Williams right now because I imagine we'll get to it. But I want to give an honorable mention here because I really thought you would call out this person. Honorable mention to Max Verstappen because we had questions about Red Bull's performance. We had questions about if Max could overcome the car. And I'll be honest, I mean, the car's probably not ideal for Max, but it was kind of right there with the McLaren.
If we're talking about, no. I got to correct you on that one. I'm sorry. He was right there with the McLaren.
Yeah, I got
that. Red Bull was so beat by that McLaren, it's not even funny. And I, again, want to save this for later, but that McLaren came out rolling, man. And Max put up a fight. You could easily tell how much faster that McLaren car was. Once Lando and Oscar got in first and second, Oscar retook second place, and then they both just left Max in the dust early on in the race. And Max comes back with the fight after every safety car, after every yellow flag, brings it right back up to him and fights with them the entire race. Honorable mention for sure, Max Verstappen.
Okay, you want to move into losers?
I want to talk about the losers because everybody wants to talk about the positives and the good things that come from the Grand Prix. We're going to talk about the negatives. So give me two people, if you have two, if not just one, that you just thought underperformed or showed a lack of ability in a way that you didn't expect. Just anything that you would consider a loser.
I'm going to rule one out from the start as not a loser, and that's going to be Isaac Hadjar. And you could bring him up as a loser, but just a rough situation. Yeah. He didn't, rough situation. My first official loser, though, I really hate this. Carlos Sainz.
Oh
Okay, so
no.
you talked about the positive Alex Albon, which, scoring fifth for Albon and Williams was huge. Carlos could have been right there, if not higher. Honestly, Carlos had a chance to beat Kimi Antonelli. He really would have. And if Williams could have come out with a 4-5 or 4-6 finish in that race, their season is on a whole different trajectory. Their season's on a good trajectory right now. They have a car, they've got the drivers, but that's a massive miss of points when you had it. And Carlos just got that. I think was it officially ruled the technical issue in the car where it just gave him way too much torque out of nowhere on that safety car lap?
He said that it was a random surge of torque.
Right.
David Coulthard said something to the effect of there was a issue with the downshifting, but regardless, I mean, the fact of the matter is it, to me, it looked like the car had too much power and caused wheel spin, which on this track in the wets caused him to fly, man. I mean, that's all it seemed to me, at least.
My second loser is going to be Oscar Piastri. McLaren was set to have a day and go either 1-2 or 1-3. And the pressure was turned on by Max. Max was with him all day long, and you can't make any mistakes. And he had, I forget exactly where it was in the circuit, but he went off the track like 3 different times trying to recover that, and then finally ended up in the wet grass, which, you're like, okay, it's not a gravel trap, you're good. It took him like 3 or 4 minutes to back onto the track.
You're in wet grass, so I mean,
he was just spinning tires, and eventually he couldn't go forward. He had to go backwards at like a mile an hour to get back on the track.
That crowd lit up though when he got back on the track, because if you looked at the scoring column on the left, if you're watching the race, the broadcast, they had him as a DNF. They had him as out of the race, and so to see him be able to put it in reverse, spin like crazy until he gets enough traction to barely get back onto the asphalt, and then to continue on, oh dude, that crowd got wild.
He's got to be a loser, because again, McLaren had a chance to steal a ton of points in this race and they missed out on that. And again, that's his home race, and he's in the power seat right now in McLaren. Like, that's the time to win or do really well at your home race.
Yeah. And he's going to have to wait a whole nother year to get another opportunity to break what is very obviously an Australian curse. I mean,
he might not even be in the sport next year. There's these up and comer kids that might take his spot.
Jeez. I don't know about that.
All right, give me yours.
So my losers were Carlos Sainz and Oscar Piastri.
I was gonna question you letting me go first on both, but I was like, you know what? If he's gonna let me have it, I'm gonna take him.
So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you some alternatives that I was thinking about while you were giving your piece here. Number one, I'm gonna go Lewis Hamilton, and that one hurts a lot because we've been kind of hyping him up throughout the testing, throughout the practice sessions. He looked quick, he looked efficient, he looked like he was really in a position where he was going to get good points early on, probably top 5 in my opinion. And to finish 10th, it just looked like he didn't have grips with that car, and respectively, nobody else did. I mean, respectfully at least, nobody had grips with that car, not in the wets, but it felt like, yeah. It felt like he was driving the car for the first time for me. I mean, he didn't have. He was complaining about the car. I'm trying to remember what he said in the radio message, but God, was it problems with the transmission? Oh,
there's only one radio message I can remember from that race, and it was Charles Leclerc and his water leakage system,
which was great. The words of wisdom. No, Lewis Hamilton finished 10th, especially whenever his teammate was able to finish 8th. That's not a huge difference, but I felt like I expected more from him, and it kind of, for me, it's going to go down as a loss.
I really wanted to text you in the middle of the race and be like, I should have stuck to my original my predictions of Ferrari just being the worst this year.
Jeez. We'll go with my other loser. Give me the Australian Grand Prix. This track, with how wet it was, with, they talked about this in the broadcast, the lines are painted. They paint these lines for the Grand Prix. And with the wetness that was on the track, I don't know if they should have used a different kind of paint or what the issue was, but every single possible opportunity for somebody to spin out, they spun out. We lost, what was it, 5 people in total in this race? Yeah, no, 6. 6
Six,
people
including
DNF'd in this race. And it was like there was a whole, like, what was it, around lap 40 where, you know, stuff started to just go haywire, and it's like, oh, this person, oh, this person, oh, this person. And I was like, geez, man. On top of that, Carlos Sainz spinning out on a safety car, and Jack Doohan slapping the wall, Fernando Alonso slapping the wall. It was a mess. Isaac Hadjar didn't even get to start the race. I mean, it was a mess.
I still enjoyed watching it because it's chaotic, right? But there's a difference in a wet Australian race and a wet race in Brazil, like we've seen the
Right.
past couple of years. And I don't really know what the difference is, other than Brazil is not necessarily a fast track. There is so many turns, especially in sector 2. It's just weaving in and out, and you can't really build up speed. Australia has a little bit more speed to it, and maybe that causes the chaos. But you're right. The 3 drivers that recorded 0 laps of Sainz, Doohan, and Hadjar, theirs was the rain at the start of the day, which teams were iffy on which tire compound to go with. And there was a couple of different sets out there on the grid for the start. And so that was a mess. And then you're right, later on around lap 30 or 40, that was when the rain was stopping and starting a whole bunch. But it wasn't like going from a light drizzle to nothing back to a light drizzle. It would go from like a downpour to nothing to a downpour. So they were pitting, constantly changing tires. And if you just happen to stay out there for one extra lap too long, or not come in one lap when you're supposed to, suddenly you're out on the wrong tire compound for 2 minutes and you're slipping and sliding all over the place. And it was a disaster.
I just want to make sure that the emphasis on this, from what I was able to gather, was the painted lines on the track. I mean, you had radio engineers coming on and speaking to, I mean, Kimi Antonelli, you heard his engineer come on and say that people were complaining about the painted lines on the track being very slippery. And Kimi Antonelli came back and he was like, yeah, it's very slick. I almost lost it a couple times. Like, something about, I don't know if it was the type of paint that they used. Maybe they should have mixed some kind of abrasion material with it, maybe like a sand in the paint or something to make it to where there was a little bit more traction. Every single line that they painted for this Grand Prix was super slick and caused the majority of these wrecks.
Maybe like the French Grand Prix does with their runoff areas, how that's paint that they put the grit or sand or texture into, but you can't really see it on TV, but it's a textured surface.
Right.
Yeah, they've got to look at this for upcoming years. And I can't recall rainy Australian races in the past. I'm sure they've had some, but not to this level
positive.
not to this level of 6 guys going out in very random. Like, these weren't, calculated dive bomb moves where they got too no, they were driving on their own and just lost control of the car.
Half of them weren't even at race speed.
They were on safety car laps
or the formation lap.
Yeah, but you know what, Isaac, buddy, if you're listening right now, which I know he's our number 1 fan, he's been listening since day 1.
I know who you are.
Your situation is still so much better than Lance Stroll's DNS last year, so you've got that going for you, man.
Yeah, at least he didn't drive into, not hit the wall on concrete, and then willingly decide to drive into a gravel pit and beat yourself.
At least you smacked a wall and broke your car like a man.
No, Isaac Hadjar, I feel for you. I really do. I could tell the way that his head was just hanging and he chose not to take his helmet off. I mean, oh man, that was gut wrenching, especially, it's your first race. You're a rookie. Also, how about a big shout out to the fact that, 4 of the 6 rookies DNF'd in this race? So, wow.
Yeah. I know you want to segue into some other stuff. I'll just add my last thing on this, which is this race didn't tell us a lot about the season. It was too chaotic. The rain was a curveball that doesn't really show us how well teams, like, okay, I talked about earlier Mercedes being a winner. Yes, they are, because they claimed a lot of points early, which is huge for them. I have no idea if that's going to carry over to the next race or the next 3 races. They could easily be the 4th or 5th constructor on the grid going forward. The rain just tore the grid apart, and yeah, we didn't get to see the rookies because they all, other than Kimi, pretty much, because they all left the grid. They all went out.
So that's actually exactly what I wanted to segue into, and it's what did this race teach us for the future of this season? And my answer to that, absolutely nothing. I mean, we got to see all of the practice sessions, all of the testing, all of qualifying. It was all dry. It was all on dry track. And Bahrain is dry. It's humid. It's dry. In Australia, it wasn't raining yet, but it is more. It is more humid. I guess in Bahrain, it's not humid. My bad. But you know what I mean. Um, we didn't get to learn a whole lot at all with the rain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you didn't get to see what the Red Bull is in terms of comparison with Mercedes, with Ferrari, with McLaren. The only thing that I think we can safely take away of this is that McLaren does have a heck of a car. And I mean, that was obvious from that little strip of time where the track was starting to dry up and you just see them take off from George Russell, take off from Max Verstappen, and it is just Lando and Oscar going at it to the point to where McLaren came in and say, "Hey, hold position. We're not going to battle right now." Which, by the way, Oscar came back and he was not too happy with that. He was like, "Okay, I'm faster, but all right." I was like, "Whoa,
You know what? I
whoa."
I was okay with McLaren saying that. There are times when you can let your drivers fight, and early in the season, I can see that. But in the conditions of this race, don't add any more risk to what you've already got going on.
Not that it mattered.
No, unfortunately. Maybe if he was in the lead, that wouldn't have happened.
There you go. So they should have let him fight. No, but yeah, I don't think we learned anything from this race. With all the with 4 of the 6 rookies going out early in this race, we don't get to see what their potential actually is, what their ability driving side by side with some of these veterans is actually going to look like. We didn't get to see the comparison of the cars. I don't know which one's faster, the Mercedes or the Ferrari. I have no idea, because Mercedes, if you could tell, was driving very conservative and Ferrari was pushing. And, Ferrari looked like they couldn't really get around some of the back marker, or not back markers, but like the Racing Bulls and the Williams. But at the same time, that's really because they only had to follow one line, the dry line, and they couldn't really go off and try and take a different line because you would slip. So there's just no real takeaways from this race.
I think you agree on the high end, and I'll talk about the low end here, but I'll talk about the high stuff for a second. So McLaren, yeah, they have a car. Max, for now, is capable of putting the Red Bull in some quality points. We'll see how that plays out in a dry race, but I wasn't concerned with him driving that car. It didn't look like he was too far behind. I don't know enough about Mercedes. I think we learned more in qualifying about teams like Williams and their pace. Williams has a good car. Ferrari does have a little bit of pace, although they might be behind where they want to be, especially because they qualified 7th and 8th, and then obviously the race didn't go their way. I think flipping to the bottom end of the constructors championship right now, we learned a little bit more. Haas is terrible. You called this out
Awful.
in our predictions. Haas is absolutely at the bottom, and there's a massive gap in between them and everybody else. I'm off on that because I thought Stake would be at the bottom again, and I had Haas above them, but just based off testing and now based off quali in one race, Haas is in a bad way. They've got a lot of work to do. And I'll say this too. I know Pierre qualied 9th or so, but he finished out of the points. I don't think Alpine has a lot going for them. I know people were really big on Alpine coming out of testing, that maybe they're the 7th, 6th, or maybe even 5th constructor going. I didn't see it.
I think what we're looking at, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think we're going to look at Haas being, the 10 easy. But I think we're going to see a battle between Alpine and surprisingly Stake. I think, we've given props to Hulkenberg because of the fact that what we saw him do in the Haas last year, but we haven't really given a props to Bortoleto. How about the fact that he won F3, then immediately went to F2, won F2, and then immediately jumped to Formula One? And, he didn't get the opportunity to, jump right into the McLaren car like an Oscar Piastri, so we don't get to see him with the top dogs. But make no mistake, he is going to be a top dog. You don't just win F3 first year, move to F2, win F2 first year, move to F1. That doesn't just happen to a regular guy. He's going to be something special. And so him teamed up with Hulkenberg, I think Stake, it's kind of exciting this year.
Can you remember? I don't remember where he was when he crashed out. He made it to lap 45, but I can't remember where he was.
I don't remember where he was. I want to say he was outside of the top 10, but like barely.
Okay. because I think
I could be dead wrong on that.
it was tough to keep track of the race during the lap 30, 40, and 50s because again, that's when the rain was coming on and off, and so they were showing all the pit stops, but you weren't actually getting to see a lot of the race action. You were just trying to keep up with team strategy. But he made it 45 laps. You know, that's good. I don't know. I think you're right. I think Haas is at the bottom, and then there's some weird, mix of Kick and Alpine. I think Racing Bulls is a little bit ahead
Yeah, I
of
think
that
they're going
group.
to be battling with Williams, and Aston Martin. I think that's going to be a three-way battle.
Yeah, and Aston's the other thing that we didn't learn too much about. Of course, Lance got 6, which he should honestly be getting 6 a lot more. It's that's about where they should be. But we didn't learn a lot because obviously Alonso went out about halfway through the race. What else do you want to look at?
I mean, we've touched on the things that I wanted to mainly bring up, and that's the fact that we didn't really learn too much from this at all. I think looking ahead at next race, the Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai, first of all, I love that track. Absolutely love that track. But I think we're finally going to get to see what I really want to see here is I think we can safely say McLaren is far and away the top dog as far as the car build goes. What I want to see is how Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes line up with each other. I think we can make a safe guesstimate that Williams, Aston Martin, and Racing Bulls are going to be, fighting for the middle of the pack. I think it's safe to say that it's going to be an Alpine stake competition, and then I think it's safe to say that Haas is going to be at the bottom. What I don't know is the second, third, and fourth spot at all. I don't know if it's Red Bull, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari. I don't know if it's Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. I have no idea. And I think that Shanghai is going to tell us a lot because we're going to get the dry circuit from what I know right now. Obviously, that could change. But I think we're finally going to get to see what exactly to expect for the rest of the top dogs in this season going forward.
No, I'm with you, and I double checked the weather. Right now, we're 0% chance of rain for the whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we'll get to learn a little bit more about the cars. And I think China's a good track to learn about the cars. Each sector in China presents challenges. Obviously, Sector 1 has the little curly Q thing where you're going to see how well these cars perform at low speeds, getting pulled to the ground and going around that turn. Sector 2 is a little bit more normal of what you would consider, some right-hand turns, some 180, some hairpins. And then Sector 3 is mostly that flat out long stretch of DRS. So you're going to get to see the aero performance of the cars and the pure engine power of the cars all come into play in China on a dry track. I think we should learn a lot more coming out of this. I would expect McLaren to still be on top, if not 1-2, unless there's some kind of mistake for those drivers. I'm interested to see where Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari shake out because right now it's wide open for those 3 teams.
Another thing that I'm very interested to find out, do you remember in Red Bull's dominant season where Max ran away and won every single race except for like 3 or whatever it was?
You got 19 of them, yeah.
Right. So do you remember how big of a deal they were making of 1, Red Bull's DRS, but 2, Haas's DRS, and how it was significantly stronger than all the other teams' DRSs?
I don't
don't
recall them talking
remember.
about Haas's in that sense, but sure.
So yes, so they did. Haas had an amazing DRS that season, but the gain in speed that you get from the Red Bull and the Haas's DRS activated versus a Mercedes activated, or insert team here, was significantly stronger. I'm wondering what it's going to look like on that long back straight at Shanghai with these different teams' DRS systems. I want to know. I want to know who has a strong DRS or who has an all-out engine speed. Because if you remember, last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, I can't remember, but Mercedes' car had a lot of drag to it. And it almost felt like even with the DRS, it didn't really help it out too much whatsoever because it had a lot of drag to the car.
There's
So
some cars that perform like again that year the 21 win Red Bull season.
23?
No, they won 21 races that
23
year.
was when Max went crazy, I thought.
No, I'm saying they won 21 races.
Oh.
Sorry. Because remember, Sergio was around and he got 2 of them somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, far and away, you could tell theirs was more powerful. Has McLaren cracked that code? Does Mercedes have that? Does Ferrari have that? We'll get to see this weekend. I don't know exactly how long that straight is. There's 2 straights in Shanghai, the opening like grandstand straights and then the back straight, which is the big one. But it's got to be up there with Mexico and Baku. It has to.
The only reason I bring this up is because when Max had his DRS open in Australia, now granted there was rain and the track was slippery,
Also,
it really...
Is it not crazy that they allowed DRS?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That is
What?
wild. Absolutely wild that they would even allow that to happen, but I was enjoying it. Regardless, when Max had the DRS open and he was chasing down Lando in those last, 4 laps, whatever it was, it really, it would bring him up to the back of that McLaren, but not much. I mean, really not much. It's not like he was all of a sudden like with the ability to do a possible dive bomb or go around the outside. No, he would get to about 3/10 and then they would jump back out whenever they got through the corner.
It's enough to keep your position, but not enough to overtake.
Right. Versus the Red Bull of old, where I feel like with that DRS system that they had in 2023, he probably would have had enough DRS to, I mean, dude, I'm getting flashbacks of Sergio being able to get out of the DRS chain, just based on the power of the Red Bull's DRS alone. He would be passing other cars who also have their DRS activated and getting out of that whole train. And it's like, that is the Red Bull DRS that I know. And I didn't see that from Australia. Obviously, there's a lot of variables there, but I just thought that was interesting.
That's maybe an Adrian Newey design that we see in future Aston Martin versions.
2026 coming at you. How are we feeling on Liam Lawson? Now, I know it's hard to say that because of, obviously so many variables in this race. Are we feeling like another Sergio? Are we feeling like another Daniel Ricciardo when Max and Daniel went at it in their first couple years? I mean, what are we feeling?
I don't know yet. Qualifying was super disappointing.
Very.
Getting 18th. And then I know why he did the pit lane start in the race. Might as well change some parts on your car if you're already going to be that far down, whatever. And wasn't it like a rear wing that they had to change? It was something weird. It wasn't a normal.
I don't know, part. But I also didn't see. I mean, he would make a couple passes, but man, he really wasn't making the kind of advances that I was expecting from a front. Not talking about the most dominant car on the track, just a front car in general.
Yeah, we'll have to get more out of China because I don't know. I mean, he's had in the last season or so when he's been on track, it's been good for what cars he was in, but. I don't know yet. I really don't. Do you have an opinion on
him? From what I've seen in interviews, it looks like he's got the attitude. I don't know that he has the confidence. I mean, he's obviously got an attitude. He presents himself nice. He presents himself like, I'm going to go and bring the fight to Max. But I don't know if he's got the comfort in the car to have the confidence to really take this thing to Max. But that remains to be seen because it was a wet track.
You know what his job is this season, don't you?
Stay close enough to Max that they get enough points to finish second in the constructors? I don't know.
Not Max. Beat Kimi Antonelli.
Yeah.
And right now he's behind Kimi Antonelli. Of course, wet race. But if you regularly beat Kimi Antonelli, you're the better driver.
But that's also assuming that Red Bull and Mercedes are going to have the same car, which again, we don't know yet.
My assumptions coming out of testing and everything that we've heard over the offseason that they would be fairly even. That was reflected in my predictions, and this race kind of backed that up with how they finished. But we'll see.
Also, an unsung hero. I want to give props to Yuki Tsunoda. Before things started to go south for him, he was hanging on to that number 4 spot for dear life early on in the race for quite a while, and it was pretty fun to watch.
All right, guys, we gave you our winners and losers at the start. We want to know yours, so drop a winner and a loser down in the comments and let us know if you agree with ours.
Guys, if you think that Lando Norris is the real loser here, because let's be honest, if you're in that McLaren, you should have been dominating. I don't care if the track was wet. Let us know if you agree. I might agree with you. I might not. Sometimes I just talk.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye, guys.